Welcome to the CLB Forge podcast, brought to you by CLB North American Mission. This is the show to help equip you and your church for mission, ministry, and multiplying disciples.
Welcome to episode 56. Today is kind of a new beginning for our podcast because all three of us that you're looking at right now, it's our first time. So for myself, it's my first time recording without Ryan and actually having to kind of lead the ship. Usually Ryan does a great job of having everything organized and putting the guest at ease. So hopefully there's not too much anxiety, Rachel, on your end, as I just said, all right, guys, we're getting ready to go and here's everything. And then I hit record and we're just going for it. It's Daniel's first episode recording as a new host.
What's up, everybody? That's right.
So we're happy to have you. And it's Rachel's first podcast ever. So welcome in, Rachel. We're so happy that you were able to join us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rachel, welcome. Rachel is the director of music ministries at Mount Bethel Church. She's also a voice coach with a private studio in Mount Bethel, Pennsylvania. After graduating from Syracuse University with a Bachelor of Music degree, she attended Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and received a Master of Arts in Missiology. She's the proud and awesome aunt of Ellie, JP, and Rosie, and a Stargate SG-1 fan. That's different. That's cool. I mean, that's a thing. I've seen that show on like Netflix as I scroll by. Is it worth the stop? Like,
it's amazing, but you gotta be in for the long haul.
So the beginning's bad is what you're saying. Like the beginning's not good.
It's that sci-fi 90s sci-fi. Like you just gotta stick with it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the whole character building thing. It's a little rough in the beginning, and then once you establish the characters, then you're like, all right, I can get behind this. I totally understand that. So prior to episode 50, we used to ask the question, what do you prefer, Star Wars or Star Trek? So now you're a Stargate fan. But now that we're after it, we're asking a new question. And so the new question that we're asking is, what was your favorite Saturday morning cartoon or cartoon of your youth?
Yeah, so it's not really Saturday morning, but we're after school. I would go X-Men.
Oh, man.
X-Men.
Like the one that now you can watch on Disney Plus?
Yeah.
Oh, so good. I love that intro music. Fire. It's so good. All right. So let's get into a couple of our questions so that our listeners don't stop listening to us and are now going and watching Disney Plus to watch X-Men. So Rachel, right out of the gate, can you tell us about a person in your life who had a big impact on your discipleship journey? Why was that person so special, and what did they do to make such an impact on your life?
Yeah. So when I was at Syracuse, I joined the Baptist Campus Ministry, which was a church on campus. And it was besides our pastor, it was a student-run organization. And so the pastor, when I came in as a freshman, we met and I mentioned that I was studying music, but I really wanted to lead worship in the church. And within the end of that first year, he let me join the leadership team of the ministry, and I was able to lead worship for our Sunday morning services, which was really, really great. And that also included, meetings with the other student leaders, so the upperclassmen, and meetings with him as well. And so that really kind of just giving me the opportunity to serve in that way and then to grow, just like fostered the love for it and gave me the skills. Then I built up the skills to be able to do what I'm doing now. And then I would also have to say that Pastor Chris Priestaff here at Mount Bethel Church, because when I moved home from seminary, didn't really know what was going on. And he, called me up and said, hey, I hear you're around. I'd love to have you work with our youth choir, and just gave me some great opportunities there. And as part of that, we would meet together every week. We studied some books together as continuing my seminary degree. And so that was really great too.
Yeah, that's sweet. I love hearing that about people who have been influential for you. If I can ask you a little side question, your primary instrument would be what?
Voice,
but you also play piano, correct?
Yes.
Do you have any other instruments kind of floating around that you also dabble in?
Well, yeah, not anymore, but when I was young in fourth grade, I started on the saxophone and played the saxophone all the way up through high school. And then senior year of high school was when I decided to go for voice to college. And so I kind of stopped it. But I mean, that was my first love, and that's what first I think helped me to read music, because I think singers get away with not like reading music. You could just like learn it, but
Right.
with playing an
Right.
instrument, you've got to be able to read the notes and stuff. And so I was like hardcore, like jazz band, marching band, concert band. I played the bari and the tenor sax as well as the
Okay.
alto, and so that was pretty awesome.
Sweet.
Nice.
So what how long have you been playing piano for?
I mean, like most, well, not most kids, but I took piano lessons when I was young, and
Yep.
it never really stuck. It was
Yeah.
like you do it for a little while, and then you move on, and then you go back to it. And with my degrees, I had to take piano in school, and I was able to get good grades, but I just like lacked that discipline to really practice enough to get to claim to be like a good piano player. So what really happened is when I started teaching private lessons, I found I had to accompany my students. So if they were going to sing, I wanted to be able to
Yep.
play for them. And so about 12 years ago, I would kind of say like I finally got myself in gear to to start doing it. And that was the big difference, is practicing in all those lessons that I was teaching, like having to play for them, having that pressure of having to do it. That really made me learn like the muscle memory that had to happen and come along with it.
Nice. Nice.
Right.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So was it? I'm assuming that it was Chris that brought you in as more of the music director, director of music ministries over there at Mount Bethel.
Yeah. So I grew up in the area, and so I had a connection to the church. This wasn't my church
Okay.
home, but I had a connection to it. And yeah, so I was home from school and not kind of really sure where God was leading. And then I got a call from Pastor Chris to come in and meet. And that's when I volunteered to lead or he asked me to volunteer to lead the teen choir here. And then that was in the spring of 2009. Then in the fall of that same year, I started directing the junior choir, which is kids in second grade through sixth grade. And then doing like seasonal, like a Christmas choir with adults and a Easter choir with adults. And then it's just transformed over those last, 12 years into more and more and more, which is so great. I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. You're involved in a ton of the different the music ministries over there at Mount Bethel. So as you're like reflecting on all the different roles that you're playing, all the different hats that you have on within that music ministries director position, what is the essential element of a music ministry in your opinion?
Yeah, I would say that it's to enable the corporate proclamation of the gospel. And so that's going to look different in every church, in every situation, like what your people are capable of, what resources you have, just to enable that. So that's the big word, is how do I kind of foster this love of proclaiming the truth of the gospel through song? Yeah, so that would be the core of it.
Oh man, that's fantastic. Can you say that phrase one more time? Just because I
Yes.
think it's important to have that highlighted.
To enable the corporate proclamation of the gospel.
To enable the corporate proclamation of the gospel. Fantastic.
Yeah. Because we all like have our stuff that we listen to on our own. If we listen to certain songs or we read certain devotionals, things that kind of stir our own hearts. But it's when we gather together, what's going to stir us collectively, what's going to focus us collectively on God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so those are the things when we're thinking about music ministry within the church on Sunday mornings, on, Wednesday nights, any other times that we meet, what's going to bring people together so that we can be unified in proclaiming that truth.
One of the fantastic things about a mission statement kind of like that is that context is part of it, right? Mm-hmm. So within something like that, you're able to develop it for the context that you're in. So it doesn't matter if you're a small church or a big church or what necessarily that looks like. You're able to say, no, like we're just trying to enable the proclamation through worship. Like this is important to us. And so that's really cool. I really like that. Well done. That's great.
Yeah. So as we go into that, as we're talking about, gathering people together and helping others to not only corporately worship together, but then also lead that form of corporate worship too. How do you, Rachel, train and disciple someone to take a leadership role in the worship experience?
So I would say it starts for me from the point of that like junior choir phase. So if those kids are in second grade, I want them to know that singing in church is normal and is something that we should do. It's not something to be nervous about. It's not something to be scared of. to rejoice in the Lord together with your peers or with people of other generations is completely normal and what we are called to do as the church. And so getting those little kids up in front on Sunday mornings, just having them sing those songs of faith, whether or not they truly understand every word they're saying, that's okay. And this is another point, but that's okay, right? For the young ones. But then taking those opportunities is saying, hey, we just sang about the blood of the lamb. Is that weird to anybody? Like, does anyone know what that means? And then giving them a chance to explain. And what I love is then when the sixth graders talk to the second graders, they're like, no, this is why. This is why we say that. And this is what it means. And then translating that up into teen choir, giving those kids a chance to sing songs that maybe are in styles that they listen to and that they like, or maybe stretching them a little bit and say, this may not be what you like, this might not be your jam, but let's do it together because the words are really awesome. Let's sing this, for church. And then with the adult choir, I think it changes to be like, let's continue to use the gifts of music that God has given us, no matter what our age is. I actually forgot the question. I started ranting.
No, that's okay. Yeah, that's okay, because you did answer it as you were going through, and it's kind of multifaceted. So you're looking at kind of nurturing at a very young level, so that as they grow up, it's not something that they're hampered by, but it's something that they can genuinely enjoy. It's not like worship is a burden. And I feel like you guys are really instilling that at a young age. It's something where they all can share into, which kind of brings me to my follow-up question, which is, how do you go about balancing the talent in your worship ministry? Because I know maybe sometimes people can look and get frustrated, or even think to themselves, well, I'm not nearly as good of a singer or nearly as good of a player as so-and-so. And then they forget about that, the mission statement of making it about corporate worship, and they make it more about, well, if I can't do it better than this person, then I probably shouldn't do it, and I'll let that person just do everything. So how do you go about balancing that, the talent levels?
Yeah, well, I would say too, like, part of my niche that I found is because I teach private voice lessons. Like, I do teach some of the youth here because they're involved in local productions and high schools and stuff like that, or they just love music and they want to sing. So I like to get kids in for private lessons, and then we work on songs that they can sing for church, and kind of leading them that way, gauging talent beside for lack of a better word, that way. But I'd say, like, with our praise team situation, now this whole year we haven't had our praise team meeting because of COVID stuff. So, but in the past, like, when I came in, there was an established team. And so I had to kind of like come in, but then also kind of find a way to gently be overseeing that. And I would say that you don't want to put someone in a role that they're not capable of doing well. That doesn't mean they have to be perfect at it or they have to be the best, but you want to make sure that where you place people, they're going to be able to thrive and to succeed in that. Like, you wouldn't put someone in front of like a Bible study who couldn't teach it or wasn't able to have the time to do the research that they needed to teach that. And so music ministry shouldn't really be different. Just because someone wants to do it doesn't mean that exactly what they see themselves doing is the role that they need to play.
How do you have that conversation, right? Because I mean, we've all had situations where someone's been like, this is really what I want to do. And it's like, well, you don't really know how to do that as well as you need to yet to be able to lead. Like, we're happy to incorporate you, we're happy to have you have your time in that role, but you're just not quite ready for this yet. How do you have that conversation with someone?
Well, I think it's different for every case, and you have to gauge the person's personality. But it's going to probably be awkward, and it's better to maybe not do it on your own. So if, like, for me, if I could have like Pastor Chris or even like Andrew Little, who's the youth pastor, with me, just to not be on your side, but to just make sure that the person doesn't feel like, well, you don't want them to feel ganged up on, but you also want to feel like, that this is trying to be communicated in a loving way. From a singing point of view, I would just try and give them another outlet. So I'd say, we'd really love to have you in the choir. Maybe in the choir, singing with other people, you'll be able to develop that skill, be better at singing harmonies or something like that. I would have encouraged people to take private lessons on like guitar or piano if that's something that they want to do, because it is a skill that needs to be nurtured and developed.
Absolutely.
And so allowing, just kind of prompting them to do that. So, come back in 6 months, be able to play like these songs for me, and we'll see how it goes. And it's, you don't want to make them feel like judged or not good enough, but you also need to communicate, like you said, that it may not be the right time, or they might not be where they need to be. And so I would say that just in a loving, kind way, try and communicate that to them. It wasn't a very good answer, but
no, it's a great answer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard. It's a hard question to answer, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not an easy thing to navigate. I know I've had to try and navigate that a few times myself. And I mean, I've had people come up to me and be like, yo, like maybe this isn't exactly where you should be at this point in time. And there's a bit of a maturity and growing, a maturation process with being told that maybe it's not your time yet. And that's okay for all of us. It's just, it can be very hard to communicate that well at times. I like the idea of bringing in pastors or bringing in people that they know love them, right? That they know want the best for them. And so even like framing or phrasing it, shaping it in that type of language, I think can be great. I think that's a great idea. It's a great approach, but it's not an easy,
No.
It's just not an easy like topic of conversation.
Yeah. And I also like the idea of giving them another way to serve in that same ministry. So if someone's like, hey, I really want to be a part of like the worship ministry, like, you know what, I can really use someone to move chairs on Sunday morning, or I could really use someone to wrap up all these cables in the right way, you know? And
right.
so if behind that they're wanting to serve is a servant's heart and not just kind of wanting to be up front, then that will shine through in that moment by giving them that other opportunity. And I would pray for them and hope that the Spirit would work in them and allow them to be able to serve in that way. And then hopefully it progresses to kind of what they envision themselves doing.
I love that idea of being mindful of what's underneath the individual's desire to be, especially a part of the worship team. You know, like now you turn on K-Love or whatever your local Christian radio station is, and you just hear like concerts, like rock star worship songs. And we have some kids in our church too who are like, oh, I want to do that. And I'm like, okay, but what's underneath that? Is it your desire that you want to worship the Lord and this is the way that you want to do it? Or is it just that you want to get up front, bang on some drums, or, you know, play your bass as loud as you can, play the bass riff that you've worked on in order to get noticed? And while there's no problem with sharing your hard work, what's important is making sure that people realize that they're up there to serve the Lord, and they can serve the Lord in so many different ways. And so I love that you're conscious of that, Rachel, where you're like, you know, what's underneath that? What's your desire? Is it to just be a rock star? Because then you're missing the point of what worship actually is. And I think that that's something very important too for other individuals to realize as they're listening to this recording as well.
Yeah. And I know one thing that I've done in the past is when I've had people that have wanted to be involved in areas that maybe they're just not mature enough to be involved in yet, particularly in front, dealing with like music or instruments or the voice, like singing and all that. I'll put them in the sound, like just have them go back and deal with the sound a little bit. And then they can even understand, they have a better picture as to why maybe we want some more maturation process going on before we're up front, because you're like, oh, so this is what it sounds like for everyone else, because I don't really get to hear that all the time. And it's like, okay, so maybe it would be good not to embarrass myself in front of everybody. And maybe someone is doing this out of love. Like there's just some further development that can happen there too. But yeah, finding places for them to plug in, finding places for them to still be involved in ministry, recognizing that undergirding desire is fantastic. And so as we look at, you know, the leading and transitioning just a little bit there, when you're leading there, you're also going to be needing to like meld things with the rest of the service, right? So what process do you use to choose songs that harmonize with the texts for the week? It sounds like you've got at least a decent relationship there with your pastor. He brought you in to lead this thing, right? So you've got that, which is great. But what process do you use to choose the songs?
Yeah, so I do you know, try and get the sermon info as soon as possible.
and we know that pastors are really good at getting those to you early, like in plenty of time.
On the ball. Yeah.
Totally a strong suit for all of us. Like we're so good at that.
So, but I think you know, just knowing the text, knowing my biggest thing, even when I lead worship at like retreats and stuff, is knowing within like a session or on a Sunday morning, like where is the speaker going? Where's the preacher going? What is the response song at the end? So if there is a closing song, in some ways I feel like it's the most important to kind of be on the same page, because you don't want to end with like a call to confession and then, oops, I planned, a great joyful song instead of like a real kind of turning towards, into your heart song. So I would say the closing song, just knowing where the message is going to end up, like what's the closing thought, like where's all this stuff leading to. And sometimes you can tell that through just the text, but I also think it's nice to talk through the message. And I think that's good for pastors too, to have to think through that, say like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't really know where it's going yet. Well, like let's try and formulate this so that we both can, have that hashed out. I would also say that, going back to the last thing, it's knowing who's on that week. So if I've got, a great piano player, then I'm like, hey, we're going to do lots of hymns. Or, hey, if we have this like awesome drummer today, I'm like, let's do these songs at the beginning, to not to showcase that person, but just to know that it's going to go well. They're skilled in this. Let's let that happen this week. And so that does play a part. And some people might say like, oh, that shouldn't play a part. Every musician should be able to play everything. That's just not the situation we're in,
Yeah. And that's not the situation anybody's in.
That's completely unrealistic too. Like I love, and I think that you need to do that. You need to play towards people's strengths. Absolutely. Because then not only are they able to lead effectively, but also it unhampers them to be worried about, oh, well, I'm not too comfortable on, what's the tablature for drumming a hymn. And then they're so caught up in their head about that they're like, oh, if I make a mistake, how do I recover that? As opposed to just being like, oh, it's this song that we're going to play. It fits well with the drums, so instrumentation. I love that you're thinking about that, Rachel, that instrumentation also plays a factor in as much as, learning the text for the week. Also knowing who's on your worship team is a factor as well of what you're going to pick. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we do like like I said, this past year, like take that out. But before that, we did, a rotation of a few different people. We were blessed for a time to have like 4 drummers, 2 guitar players, a couple pianists.
Stop talking. Oh my word.
I mean, that's not the case. That's not the case anymore. But it was really great. And so as much as as hard as that was to organize like the schedule of who's playing when and who's playing with who and what's the best, the best groups to put together.
Right.
It was really, really a huge blessing. And I think, like you said, that we want to be able to give these people a way to succeed, and if our church isn't a huge fan of like redone hymns. So if you're going to take a classic and then change it up, for the most part, it's not going to be received as well as you'd think it would be. But another church, that might be what they love. Our church is like, if you're going to do a hymn, let's just do the hymn. Right. And so there's no, and that I've learned over time. And sometimes I'll still try and throw some of the, I'm like, but this one's so good. I'll try and throw it in, and it doesn't go well. But, you just try things out and just holding on to, okay, this worked, this didn't, and being okay with that. Don't be prideful in like, well, I want to do this, I want to make it work. If it's not working for your people, then it's not following, it's not enabling them to corporately proclaim the truth of the gospel. That's not, all they're thinking is like, oh, I wish we would just sing the normal holy, 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 or something like that.
So as our listeners, I'm sure, sorry, Daniel, as our listeners, I'm sure are hearing from the question that you asked initially, there are so many different variables that play a factor in it, because now you just raised another one, Rachel, where you said the congregation too play a factor in the songs that you're going to pick. And so now you have, the worship team and their skills, you have the text that the pastor is going to preach on, and now you also have the ones where okay, people respond positively to this song, therefore if the sermon is about this, I can pick the song that really is going to be a part. Like I know for our church was built on the song Blessed Assurance, and
built on it.
Dude, totally, man. Like awesome. It is ingrained in our congregational DNA, and people when they hear the intro of that song, they go nuts.
They start bouncing in the seats.
They
It's like,
go
oh
nuts.
yeah,
And I know
here we
that
go.
that sounds
Here we go. It's
ridiculous
coming.
because the song is just like, okay, all right, okay.
Yeah.
But like to our people, there's more than just the words and the song. There's like a connection to it. And I think that that's what music does really, really well. So as leaders, as you're picking music, know what your congregation really likes, like know what their top 10 is, and make sure that you're incorporating those, as opposed to trying to do, oh well, I just heard this song and let's learn 5 new songs this week.
Well, I have a question along that line then too, though, is so Rachel, you said that you know that your church likes it when it's not a redone hymn. How did you find that out? Do you have like a process? Do you just like have a few old people that are like, forget you if you ever do this song again? or is there like how do you do that? Because I think that's a very important like piece of the communication, right? I mean, as leading worship, you can stand up there and like wait for people to start bouncing and be like, okay, they like this one, got to make a mental note. Or maybe you got a box in the back that says never touch these songs again, and they can just like put the little envelope. I don't know. Do you have a process for figuring out what your congregation likes?
Well, I don't know if you've ever realized this, but like, people are very opinionated about music. So,
that's true. That's true.
You're gonna hear about it if it's not something that they go with. So and sometimes people don't say anything, but then if they feel strong enough about it, they're gonna say something, and they say it in a loving way. Like I haven't had anyone ever get mad at me for anything, but it's more just like, yeah, I don't know why we did that one. It really, it didn't really go, or, oh, can't we just play them the old way? So it's those little phrases that you hear, brought up or in conversations with people. But people, they, I think probably more than the messages, they're going to care about the music, or they're going to feel freer to comment on it. They'll just, they might not tell the pastor like, oh, why are we preaching from Ephesians again? But they would tell the music person, wait, we did this song 2 weeks ago. Why are we doing it again? Right. So that's, I think, just paying attention and listening and not taking it to heart, but just,
Does it seem to be like the same voices each time? Or is there like, do you have a way of like, sometimes for me, right, when I've had someone, we have our regular voices that are like, hey, like this. Hey, didn't like this. So then sometimes what I'll do is I'll go to somebody that I don't hear from very often and be like, hey, I saw you swaying or whatever. What do you think about this kind of music? What do you like? Are you in agreement with the squeakiest hinges on the door? Or are we like, I don't know. Is that okay? Do you think that's wise? Should I just be going with the loudest and the other people just probably don't care? I'm not sure. I'm not saying I'm doing it right. I'm just curious as to what your opinion would be on that.
I think that if someone says something, they're probably not the only person that's thinking it, And so if they feel strong enough to kind of bring it up, or comfortable enough with you to bring it up, then there's probably other people that feel that same way. Gotcha. And you, like you said, you learn those voices. You're like, do I have to really listen at this point? Or I would go to the elders or the pastor and say, someone said this, how did you guys feel about it? Is that something I need to do? Because I really do think we are under the elders, and the elders are under the congregation. And so we want to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same path. And so you don't want to, I think you just really need to be careful of not causing waves where there don't need to be any waves. If there's another way to do something, then that's fine. Now, if the Lord is clearly calling to something within music ministry, then I think it's okay at some points to stand firm. If you feel that has been proven to you through the scripture and has been proven to you through your prayer time, then follow through with that. But I think there's also times when it's okay just to ask other people. Yeah. Like you said.
Cool. So then, with the idea of bringing in new songs, doing things, maybe shaking it up a little bit for the congregation, how often do you incorporate new songs without overwhelming people?
Yeah, so I don't know if I have like a timeline for it, but I kind of feel like when I find a song that I want to implement, and that's usually going to come from a place of really loving the text of the song. I'm more about like does this say the truth of what we want to proclaim, like in a really interesting way or a new way, or does it reach deep into the hearts of will it reach deep into the hearts of the people? That's when I find songs when I want to introduce them, not just the songs that are like, hey, this is like number one on CCLI, or this is,
Right,
we should play this.
Everybody else likes it. We should too.
We should too. We'll just take that line out. Yeah. So no.
Right.
Yeah. Well, but so I think that way, and like I said, this goes back to then with the discipleship of the younger singers, is I love to assign new songs I want the congregation to do to like one of the teens that takes lessons with me, or even an adult if that song is appropriate for them, and introduce it as like an offertory or special music. Maybe for a week, 1 week, do it that way so everyone could just hear it, and then the next week do it with the full praise team or with an ensemble again, and then the third week ask the congregation to sing it, because we all have different musical like intuition, and we could pick up songs. Some pick up songs like really fast, some take a little longer, especially nowadays that most churches don't do printed sheet music, or people don't read the sheet music. You're really just going from the lyrics, and then you're like your musical memory, you have to remember how it goes and everything. So I think the more times people can hear it, the better. So I would say doing it once as like a solo, once again maybe as like the praise team, but still the congregation's not necessarily invited to join in,
Right.
And then maybe the third week in a row doing it with people like encouraged to sing along.
Okay. How many songs do you guys do in a church service?
We do usually 4.
Okay.
And then possibly 5. So if we have an extra element, like a missions moment where someone's going to share, or a ministry moment where someone's going to come and talk about VBS or, something else, then that takes up time. We do plan out the minutes. So we'll look at it and say, okay, this is going to take 3, this is going to take 7. And we try and keep it to about, a little over an hour. Right. But we will cut things out if it starts to get long. Like I said yesterday, or we had our children's musical for the spring. Right. And so during church yesterday morning, the kids sang one of the songs from the musical as like a preview. So that was part of the timing. So we had to take some of the songs out. So yesterday we only did 3 congregational songs. So we think through all that stuff. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you kind of have to be adaptable when it comes to situations like that. And I think that's the best part that music does within the setting of worship, is it kind of melds everything together. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times, like, music is the between certain things to keep people focused on what's going on. And I love that aspect of music. In fact, one of the things that I learned from Andrew at Mount Bethel is even just having that like ambient background music in the same key of what you're playing, it kind of leads to the overall feel of the worship setting. And so I love that, like, that people are able to use different attributes and then share them too. So to our listeners, what are some things that you're doing, that you're incorporating within your setting of worship to lead the congregation? What's working for you? What are you using? What aren't you using? What are some things that you want to adapt? Maybe if you have any questions, write them in the comments. And Rachel, we're just so appreciative that you were willing to sit down with us and share your knowledge and your passion too, which is great. And so thanks for being a tremendous guest. We're happy that you were able to come on our show today. To our listeners, thanks once again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the show. We attempt to drop a new podcast every Tuesday, and so you'll be the first one to get that if you subscribe. And we'd love it if you share the podcast with a friend or a colleague. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Rachel, for being on the show. You were a tremendous guest, and we will see you next time. Bye,
thanks,
guys.
everybody. Woo!
This has been an episode of the CLB Forge podcast, brought to you by CLB North American Mission. Thanks for listening. We welcome your questions and comments. Email us at podcast@clbforge.org.